Hi, my name is Ben Thompson. I am recently joined the faculty here at ETCAsia, where I teach Old Testament and Hebrew language. And prior to that, actually, I've been in the UK, where I've been a pastor for about 9 years. Actually, I've been in ministry for nearly 20 years, a little bit of a gap in the middle when I went to study at theological college. I've been leading a church congregation in the Cotswolds in Gloucestershire. I've just completed a PhD alongside that in Old Testament, conveniently, looking at the books of 1 and 2 Samuel. I'm living here with my wife Susie, my beautiful wife Susie, and my 3 children, Molly, Dylan and Finn, aged 13, 11 and 9. And we can't wait to come across to Singapore to be with you and to be involved with the amazing work that the Lord is doing in that part of the world. If you've read much of the Old Testament, it can feel like a very primitive and barbaric book. It feels so removed from our sophisticated modern world as we read about armies just destroying each other. Worse than that, though, it's not just that it's irrelevant, it can seem distasteful or even dangerous. It can seem to suggest that does religion lead to violence? Does God even stand behind violence? And in the modern world, those ideas, well, they're very uncomfortable for us. What do we say, therefore, to the issue of why the Old Testament has so much violence in it? Well, first of all, we want to say, yes, it does. You only have to read to chapter 4 to come across the first murder in the Bible, and what a horrendous murder it is. One envious brother, Cain, strikes dead his innocent brother Abel, purely out of envy and jealousy. 2 chapters later, we come across the story of the flood. Genesis 6, verses 11 to 12. Let me just read to you what we read there. It's devastating. Just a few chapters into the Bible. Genesis 6:11. The earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So the Bible gives us a very honest look at the nature of the human heart. And it shows us that in the right circumstances, or rather the wrong circumstances, we are all capable of great wickedness. And the Bible says to us, this is the world we live in. Maybe at this particular moment in history, in our particular place in the world, we feel protected from this. But the reality is we live in a violent world. The World Health Organization says that last year, every year, 1.6 million people lose their lives to violence. And if this book is to give us any help and any hope in the raw and painful realities of this brutal world, it needs to be honest with us about the nature of the human heart. See, the Bible is full of violence because the heart is full of violence. But there's more, of course. Carrying on in verse 13 of Genesis 6, God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm going to destroy both them and the earth. See, the Old Testament tells us that God acts in judgment upon human wickedness. And again, maybe that feels distasteful to us today, but God promised in the Garden of Eden that he would judge rebellion against him. He is perfectly just and faithful to his word. And he knows that to remove wickedness and violence from the earth requires judgment. And each of the judgments in the Old Testament, from the flood to Sodom and Gomorrah to the 10 plagues, are a warning and a foretaste of the great judgment that will one day come. See, the Old Testament does have a lot about violence in it. It confronts us with the 2 massive problems that face us: the violence in our hearts and God's judgment that will come terribly upon the world. But wonderfully, that isn't the whole story of the Bible. That's not even the main part of the picture that the Old Testament paints. See, the Old Testament points us time and again to a God who is far more patient with us than we could ever hope to, or ever dare to hope. A God who, despite human stubbornness and sin, breaks in to save his people. See, when Moses meets with God on Mount Sinai, God declares his name to him. And this is what he says. He passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness, maintaining love to thousands and forgiving wickedness, rebellion and sin. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. See, we have a God who does act in judgment upon sin, but who is abundantly patient and gracious. Each book of the Old Testament reveals to us a God who who longs to save his people from the violence in their hearts and his judgment upon that violence. That is the wonderful news of the Old Testament. We have a God who loves to save. And then, wonderfully, it begins to speak in places like Psalm 22 and Isaiah 53 about one who will come and experience the fullness of human violence as the ultimate victim, who will be brutalized, but in so doing will take upon himself God's condemnation of human wickedness and make it possible for us to be healed and forgiven and restored, at peace with God, with hearts that are cleansed, with no condemnation. See, the Old Testament gives us hope of a world free from violence through the violence that will be done ultimately to the Messiah. What a wonderful rescue the Bible gives us.